Welcome to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where we help farmers, ranchers, and business owners create a seamless transition plan for the future. From retirement to ownership transfer, we protect what you've built and guide you every step of the way.
Hello, all. Welcome back to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Heidi Olson. All right. Before we dive into stories from the field, I want to take a moment to tell you a little bit more about me and my work experience. Growing up on my family's ranch, there was no shortage of work. However, my favorite chore was working cows. Why? I got to ride horse and see what the calf crop looked like to start picking next year's show heifer. Working with our animals was the most rewarding to see how well we could train them, whether it was training our working class ranch horses to compete against expensive horses and to qualify for the state fair, or train our show heifers to ride like horses in the corral. I recall a time the local feed dealer asked my brother and I to walk our heifers in a parade to be that walking billboard for them. I can honestly say they were champs that day for participating, only becoming stubborn at the end of the parade. My love for animals also gave me experiences off the farm as a 4-H livestock judger and representing the Angus breed as a North Dakota Angus queen. That was a few moons ago, and the last of my pageant days. All right, now to my work experience. Last time I mentioned that I've spent the last 22 years working in a trust department. When I started, I was up for the challenge to learn every product and service a trust department offered. What did that consist of? Managing trusts as trustee for clients and handling unique beneficiaries and the assets owned by the trust. Handling estates as the personal representative. Serving as a personal representative in estates has given me a deep appreciation for the personal side of this work. I've helped families identify, secure, and inventory everything from farm equipment to bank accounts to barns full of mystery. One of my earliest estate cleanouts involved a canning room. Picture this: shelves packed with old jars, no labels, no clear contents, just layers of decay. We couldn't tell if it was pickles or peaches. It all went into a roll-off dumpster, and thank goodness it was January in North Dakota. Because if it had been summer, the smell and the flies would have made it unbearable. That was my introduction to the hands-on reality of estate work. I've also overseen court-appointed conservatorships. Yes, I've been in the courtroom several times to testify for the good of the individual who could not handle their finances. And when I say unique clients, some of them may have been incarcerated. It's not every day you see someone in an orange jumpsuit sitting across the courtroom from you and having law enforcement on site. No matter what the situation or where the beneficiary is, they still needed to have their affairs handled. In the trust department, as trustee, it was my responsibility to manage the trust assets according to the trust agreement. If there was farmland, I managed and negotiated cash rent or share crop lease agreements. If there were oil and gas mineral interests, that brought on another set of skills, working with landmen, negotiating lease agreements on oil and gas leases from pipeline right-of-ways to reclamation of easements. I've seen it all. Okay, quick story. I was negotiating with county road authorities on a road right-of-way easement. The road needed to be moved further onto trust property. While negotiating the easement, I thought to myself, well, if the county was there with their equipment, I wonder if they can haul out an abandoned trailer house that was on the farmstead. Well, I won't know if I don't ask. And I thought it was good timing to relocate the feral cats that lived under this trailer. I also need to mention this project was off the beaten path by about 30 miles. That's 30 miles of gravel. In my negotiations with the county, they helped to remove the trailer house out through the narrow winding road, and they received an easement to rebuild the county road. If I'd have to guess, this saved the trust approximately $15,000 in removal fees. The easement was non-productive land, so there was no loss to the trust, making it a win-win for the county and the trust. The past 5 years, I had the responsibility of managing the trust department itself. That means overseeing employees, ensuring regulatory compliance, building business strategy, and growing the team and services. The department operates as a business, and I worked hard to shape it into a profit center that values both people and performance. These experiences, as well as growing up around agriculture and living it daily, gives me the understanding of passing on a farm or business that's been in the family for generations. It's not just about financial assets. It's about legacy, identity, and often healing old wounds. I've seen families come together and create a shared vision for the future. I've also seen miscommunication, resentment, and assumptions stall that progress entirely. Now that you know me a little better, let's get back to the stories, the ones that teach us what legacy really means. In the last episode, we kicked off the conversation about legacy, what it means to plan ahead, and what's at stake when we don't. Today, I want to share a few of those stories that have stuck with me. These are real-life moments from farms and businesses, families I've known, moments of tension, miscommunication, even heartbreak, and in some cases, moments of healing. All right, let's talk about what happens behind the scenes of a succession plan or lack thereof. Segment 1, the land dispute and the chickens. There's one story that always stands out. I've worked with a family. I'll call them the land family. They had an informal agreement with neighbors to sell a parcel of land. It was supposed to be paid for through a contract for deed. The buyers were running late on payments. 1 month turned into several. And in a moment, that became local legend. They tried to offer livestock, chickens that was, as partial payment. It's a little humorous when you hear it out loud now, but it wasn't funny then. There was no clear paperwork, no mutual understanding of expectations. What followed was years of resentment, silence, and a relationship that never really recovered. And it all could have been avoided with one thing, a clear conversation and a piece of paper. Segment 2, the brother who moved away. Then there was another family I observed, where the oldest son, who'd been deeply involved in the operation, ended up packing up and moving out of state. Why? Not because he didn't love the farm, not because he wasn't committed, but because the communication just broke down. The siblings weren't on the same page. The parents didn't mediate. And instead of addressing the issues, everyone just held on to their own version of what was right. Eventually, he left for Wyoming and never looked back, at least for a while. 12 years passed before conversations started happening again. And when they did, they realized it was all about miscommunication. That's what a lack of structure and communication does. It doesn't just delay planning, it damages relationships. Segment 3, a family with a plan. Well, sort of. And then there are the families who do have structure, wills, trusts, meetings with the attorney. One I worked with had all of that. The parents sat all 5 kids down, laid out their plan, opened the floor to discussion. It was civil, it was proactive, but still, those unspoken expectations were there. 3 siblings wanted a piece of the pie. 2 wanted to keep the operation intact. 1 was already thinking about how much the home quarter would sell for if they could subdivide it. The lesson here, even with a plan, if there's no shared vision or values, the structure alone won't save you. Communication has to be ongoing, not just a one-time event. Let's move on to segment 4, when tragedy breaks and builds. But not all endings are broken. One of the most powerful experiences I've witnessed was after a tragedy. In one family, I knew a son who had been estranged from his parents for years, was in a horrific farm accident. He was driving semi, hauling grain, and was hit by a train. Miraculously, he survived. But that phone call that day changed everything. His mom and dad were at the hospital that evening. Years of silence began to end at that moment. It wasn't easy, and it didn't fix every wound, but it opened the door, and that door stayed open. Still to this day, there are arguments and miscommunication, but the family is talking. That accident didn't just change one life, it reconnected the family. Sometimes it takes something unthinkable to remind us what's most important. Okay, and last segment 5, the son-in-law who was left out. Here's another kind of story I've come across that doesn't get talked about enough when the in-laws, or should I say the outlaws, are left in the dark. A son-in-law who owned high-value farmland in the Corn Belt sold everything to move closer to his new wife's family. He thought he was stepping into a future as part of the farm operation. He had experience, he had assets, and he had a vision. But what he didn't have was the family name. How many of us have seen how families hold this reason close to home? I've seen it a lot. Once he arrived, he found out that his mother-in-law had other plans. He could help, he could haul grain, but he never could run the operation. Ownership, that was completely off the table. It was a devastating realization. He'd uprooted his entire life, sold productive land to follow a plan that didn't actually include him. Today, he still lives on that family farm. He helps out occasionally, but he supports his family in another way, as an over-the-road truck driver. This story is a reminder, if you're bringing in a son-in-law or daughter-in-law, be honest about the plan or the lack of one. False hope can derail not just the operation, but the trust that keeps a family together. All right, now let's wrap up. Reflections on what we've learned. These stories are all different. Different names, different farms, different decades. But the themes are all the same. Misunderstanding, assumptions, and silence. But also rebuilding, clarity, and forgiveness. Whether your family communicates well or avoids the hard stuff, whether you're the founder or the next generation, here's what I've learned. Succession planning isn't just a legal process, it's a relational one. And if we ignore these relationships, the paperwork won't matter. It won't fix itself. At the end of the day, experience counts, but stories stick. Thanks for joining me on the Pathfinder Legacy podcast. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at pathfinderlegacy.com. Until next time, I'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.